Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Alec Karakatsanis. I'm the founder of Civil Rights Corps. I'd like to wish everyone here a happy Gideon Day. Gideon Day, of course, commemorates Clarence Earl Gideon, whose Supreme Court case helped establish the right of poor people accused of crimes in our country to be appointed an attorney if they can't afford one. Today, I'll be posing one question to each of our distinguished speakers. These speakers represent public defenders all across the country. And our goal is to encourage the press and members of the press. I welcome you here today as well. These are amazing people we have on the panel today. And our goal is to encourage you to reach out to them when you're covering stories about public safety. Often police, DAs, other members of the punishment bureaucracy are quoted in stories, are working with reporters behind the scenes, have very well-funded public relations offices to get their names out there, to get their framing of a story out there, to set the media agenda. And today we're reminding people that there is a vast wealth of expertise, and that includes people who represent often the poorest people in our society, disproportionately communities of color, immigrant communities, Black communities, all over the U.S. Who are accused of crimes. And keep in mind that in our society, about 90% of all people accused of crimes are poor. The police are only investigating and arresting and prosecuting some crimes committed by some people some of the time. Of course, there's widespread criminality, which is not really a part of our conversation about crime and safety. And the public defenders here on this panel are amazing people who have years collectively of experience thinking about these questions and these systems and understanding how these systems are functioning and why it is that they look the way that they do and why it is that they're so ineffective at actually producing safe, flourishing communities. So you all should reach out to them. You should reach out to them every time you're writing a story about public safety or crime trends. And hopefully today's discussion can be sort of a way of introducing you all to some of the perspectives that they have. So after what I'm sure is going to be an eye-opening discussion, we're going to be taking questions via the chat box. So if you have a question that you want to ask any of our panelists, type it into the chat box. I'm going to start off by introducing my old colleague from, well, not old, my colleague from when we worked together at the Public Defender Service in Washington, D.C., which was very recently. April Frazier Camara, who is president and CEO of NLADA. And can you kick us off by explaining what is NLDA's campaign for fighting for the accused, and what is it trying to accomplish?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Alec. Yes, it was only days ago when we were at PDS. So last year, NLADA launched a campaign fighting for the accused. It was during the 60th anniversary of Gideon versus Wainwright. And our goal is very simple. Our goal is to change the public narrative about public defense. The valuable role of public defenders play such a critical role in achieving equity and justice in America. Yet, the role of public defenders is yet to be fully recognized. Lawyers, social workers, investigators, clients, and community advocates fight daily to give the true meaning to the Sixth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. And for far too long, the narrative about justice, community safety, and equity has been one-sided. It's oftentimes dominated by the perspectives of law enforcement and others who do not share our values. Fighting for the accused is a part of a collective effort to ensure equitable justice for everyone who comes into contact with the legal system, regardless of their ability to afford legal representation. In order to realize equitable justice in America, we must properly fund public defense. We must level the playing field between public defense and prosecution. We have to ensure parity is realized nationwide. And we must also ensure that Congress passes the Equal Defense Act and urge the current administration to support other efforts to fund public defense. As public defenders, we operate in various regions, practice settings, and communities. But no matter where we work, we're all fighting to ensure that the government at all levels do right by the people. We are defenders of the constitutional rights of individuals, communities, and families who are disproportionately targeted and surveilled simply because of race and poverty. As public defenders, we fight daily for racial and economic justice. And public defenders are an integral part of the communities that we serve. Our clients are our neighbors, family members, colleagues, and friends. And we believe that no one should face the might of the government or a courtroom without a strong advocate by their side. Fighting for the accused. It encapsulates the essence of defenders' everyday fight for clients and communities. And anyone could need a public defender. So it's important for everyone in the public to understand that we're in this together. And our goal is to take control of our stories and our narratives in an effort to shape public opinion about public defense. Thank you all for attending the briefing today and hearing our very important message about public defense.
Thank you, April. And I just wanted to follow up and say, this campaign is really exciting for me because when I started 15 years ago as a public defender, we kind of had a different attitude as public defenders. We didn't talk to the media. We often declined to comment. We didn't engage in that. And I think as a result, extraordinary information was lost to the public and permitted a lot of manipulation of the narrative by police and prosecutors. And I want journalists to understand that today's public defenders are very, very different. Today's public defenders understand the importance of sharing with the public their wealth of expertise. You know, for example, when I started as a public defender in Washington, D.C., there was a practice in D.C. of fully shackling in metal chains all children who appeared in the court. But because the court was closed to the public, people didn't know about it. So we had 8-year-olds, 9-year-olds, 10-year-olds, children with intellectual disabilities, children who were had suffered abuse and neglect, children who are autistic, being fully restrained. And this is, really a horrific thing. It violates all kinds of international treaties, et cetera. At first, our policy was not to talk about it because, our policy was not to talk to the media. And eventually, we decided to actually tell people in DC about this practice that was happening in courtrooms every day in DC behind closed doors. And right after the Washington Post did a story on it, the policy was changed. And I think this is the power of something that people in Washington, D.C. would have been shocked to learn that their children were facing this kind of abuse. If it had happened to any of the judges, for example, if they came home from babysitting one night and the babysitter had chained and shackled their child, it would have been an outrage. And that this was happening to thousands of children in D.C. every single day. Nobody knew about it until public defenders started talking about it. And there are a wealth of issues like that. And so I think it's really, really important to turn to our panel of public defenders now, hear from them about some of the things that are on their mind. What are they working on? How are they thinking about these issues? And I'm going to start with Mano. Mano is the amazing chief public defender for San Francisco, Mano Raju. And Mano, thanks for joining us. My question for you to begin with is there's sort of this assumption that the DAs and the police are acting to further public safety. And how do public defenders, though, further public safety or community safety and advocating for their clients inside and outside the courtroom? And what is your office doing now that it wasn't doing 10 or 20 years ago?
Sure. Happy Gideon Day, everyone. Good to see everyone. Providing indigent people with fierce quality representation in court in itself fosters safer communities. And we need to reduce our skyrocketing caseloads so we can do just that. First, there's just being in someone's corner, fully seeing them, fighting for them. That itself can be a springboard to helping someone to move their life in a more positive direction. But also, wrongful convictions happen all the time. They happen due to pretrial detention and clients pleading to get out. They happen due to mischarging and overcharging and clients pleading because those factors functionally coerce pleas. And even when we get to trial, there are so many barriers to fairness and justice. That's why high-level representation is needed to avoid wrongful convictions. And for that, we need more defenders so we can bring the caseloads down. We also need more defenders so we can do the work we need to do to get our clients accepted to treatment programs to address mental health and substance use disorders. We need to keep in mind our clients, people are connected. Being caged doesn't just wreck the lives of the ones in the cage, but their communities. Many of our clients are pillars, not just for their children, but in underserved communities, our children's cousins, our clients' own siblings, caretakers for their grandparents' generation. And if they're not the pillars in the family have to shoulder even more due to a loved one being incarcerated. The incarceration of one leads to the destabilization of whole extended families and communities, and sometimes the next generation, and that impacts all of us. So that's the in-courtroom work. But I'm also proud of our programs outside the courtroom that address root causes of systems involvement and that foster community safety and resilience. We have youth empowerment programs that are called the MAGIC programs that are based in underserved communities of color. They do backpack giveaways, art and cultural events, summer educational programs, and internships. These programs keep our young people engaged on the front end, helping to help people avoid getting caught up in the carceral system on the back end. We have a pretrial release unit and a branch of that called the End the Cycle program. These are boots on the ground, culturally competent social workers, a small team that sees our clients early after arrest. They're able to work from a position of the trust because of the Fifth Amendment. They can be totally transparent for us, tell us everything, and we're also fighting for the best legal results. So we're more likely to get that trust compared to probation or parole or any other agencies. These social workers are connecting our clients to mentors, services, housing, benefits, helping our clients get to a better place to help with the underlying issues that may have led to the arrest to begin with. Also, with the goal of helping our clients not just survive but thrive, we've launched the College Pathway Project last year that formally links our office with San Francisco State and City College of San Francisco, making it easier for our clients to attain higher education and succeed there. I strongly believe that all these programs, along with fierce defense work every single day in the courtroom, directly furthers the safety of San Francisco communities. And my hope is that with more public investment in public defense, public defender offices across the country will have the resources to provide not just fierce holistic defense in the courtroom, but also to launch innovative community programs.
Thank you so much, Mano. It's especially inspiring to hear from you, given all the work your office is bombarded with recently with the sort of rising authoritarianism in San Francisco, the things that you're dealing with from a media narrative perspective, the demonization of people living on the street, of people using drugs, of people who are completely denied any of the kinds of services that they should be entitled to, and are sort of thrown into your office. And the way that your office is responding is just really exciting. And to see your office having to fight against all these other city agencies controlled by real estate developers and police unions and who are actually not trying to solve any of the problems that they're fomenting fear about. You guys are really a national leader, and it's an honor to hear you talk about a lot of that work that you're actually doing to help people. I want to turn now to Stan Germán, who is the executive director of the New York County Defender Services. Stan, let's talk about media narratives and the phenomenon of propaganda, a concept that I'm fairly passionate about, and I sort of do very little else other than talk about it. So what do you think reporters should know about crime statistics, and what is measured as a crime and what isn't? What should be measured as a crime and what isn't? Could you just talk a little bit about that concept for everyone here? You're on mute, Stan.
Sorry about that, Alex. So happy Gideon Day to everyone out there and on the panel. Certainly, when it comes to statistics, I think the first takeaway for everybody to understand is that data is driving policy. And so how we examine data, how we talk about data is going to be crucial for our legislature in terms of setting what the appropriate policy agenda is going to be. On the issue of propaganda, we could do an entire podcast, Alec, on the bail reform narrative that has transpired in New York City and New York State for the last 3 years. But I think one of the things that reporters should really focus on, I think, when it comes to to statistics is that police departments will often spend a lot of time telling you how many people they arrest on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, on a yearly basis. And they're really focused on the front end of the process. But of course, we live in a society where people are presumed innocent. And so really, I would challenge the media to focus on, well, what happens on the back end? And I think when you look at the statistics, it is striking and really frightening the number of cases that actually get dismissed. So if you take New York City, for example, and I'm going to use pre-pandemic data so that nobody says that the numbers are skewed because of the pandemic. But in 2018 and 2019, 40% of felony arrests in New York City resulted in a dismissal. 4 out of 10 cases, the entire case was dismissed. If you examine misdemeanors in that conversation, 6 out of 10 cases were dismissed post-arrest. So if I'm examining that and I'm a reporter, I immediately have 2 questions, right? Why are those people being arrested in the first place? Why is it that 4 out of 10 times when a New York City police officer makes an arrest, they're getting it wrong because that case ultimately ends up dismissed? And in the case of a misdemeanor, it's 6 out of 10. And I think the second question we should be asking ourselves, and I think this segues nicely into Brendon's topic, which is, are you making sure that your politicians are sufficiently funding public defender offices? Because those dismissals are coming about because of the advocacy and the litigation of public defenders throughout the country and throughout New York City. Because overwhelmingly, the vast majority of those individuals are represented by public defenders.
I love that. That was fantastic. Such important stuff. I'm going to kick it to Brendon Woods now, who is the chief defender in Alameda, who I have gotten to know over the years, doing a lot of work in California. So great to see you, Brendon. I want you to talk a little bit about funding parity. So what is the movement for what you call funding parity, and why is this an issue of both justice and fairness?
Sure. So I want to start off by saying, again, happy Gideon Day to everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here. So when we talk about parity, I want to clarify one thing to start from the beginning. We're talking about parity of resources. We're not talking about parity of pay. Parity of pay between prosecutors and defenders should have happened a long time ago. It should have happened in the 80s, 70s, when public defense was started. So parity of pay should be a non-starter. That should be something that's already agreed upon. What we are focused here today is talking about parity of resources, meaning the amount of money that the DA gets, the public defender should get also. That should be what should be happening in every state. So in California, a quote unquote liberal state, a blue state, a state that cares about fairness, equity, a state that cares about overcrowded prisons, about racial inequality, many people would be shocked to know that in California spends $1 billion more, $1 billion on prosecution as opposed to public defense. California spends twice as much money on prosecution. When you looked at a study with regards to the staffing of district attorneys and public defenders, district attorneys in California had over 10,000 people employed for them, while public defenders had about 4,000. And this isn't just a problem in California, it's a problem throughout the nation. I mean, throughout the nation, we have some great people on this call like Stan, who's been advocating for his lawyers in New York to get properly compensated. We've got Keisha, who's been advocating hard in Philly to make sure that their state properly funds public defense. And it's got a huge win recently, but it's still not enough. So many talk about our system and they want it to be fair and they believe it's fair, but the system cannot be close to fair when resources aren't distributed equally, when one side is twice as much. And when we think about where I'm practicing now in Alameda County, it's a liberal part of the state. We've got double liberal. We've got liberal California and liberal Alameda County. Okay, we got liberal. And based on last year's budget, If you were to add 50 lawyers to my office tomorrow, 50 lawyers, the DA would still have $18 million more in their budget than we do. 18 million. So some might say, Mr. Woods, the prosecutors, they do more work. Defenders, you only represent about 85% of the people that come through the criminal legal system. Yeah, but behind every single prosecutor's office is this massive police machine, this massive budget. In Alameda County, we've got 13 police agencies, okay? Oakland Police Department alone gets $300 million a year. Our sheriff alone gets $590 million a year. Just based on policing, the funding is $1 for defense to $25 for policing. How does that play out in our communities? How does it play out in our work? We can't investigate cases properly. We have high caseloads. It causes burnout in staff. It causes wrongful convictions. It causes people to take plea bargains. It does everything to make people lose faith in the system, and it continues this cycle of mass incarceration. In Alameda County, we're 10% Black. Our jail, one of the largest jails in the nation, is 47% Black. In Alameda County, you've got about 2,600 people serving prison sentences. 65% of those people are Black. Less than 1% are white. There are about 6 million people a year relying on public defenders. 6 million. About 76% of the people who go through the system and rely on public defenders are people of color. The Sixth Amendment was designed to protect everyone. The right to counsel should be applied to everyone. But I bet you, I guarantee you, if the majority of people who relied on public defenders were wealthy, if they were white, the system would be drastically different. It would be drastically different. If white people were treated the same way as Black people, being prosecuted, persecuted, surveilled, there would be enough funding for public defense. At a minimum, there would be parity. So, I know I probably went on a little bit long, Alec, but I want to convince people who are listening to tell their friends, tell the press, tell anyone, if you care about justice, if you care about equality, if you care about systemic racism, if you care about ending mass incarceration, then you absolutely must properly fund public defense. You have to.
Thank you, Brendon. I also wanted to just synthesize something that Stan said, which I think is really important and something that you said, which is that these two issues of propaganda and the kinds of funding decisions that local municipal governments are making with respect to which bureaucracies they shower with cash and which they underinvest in, is the idea of public relations departments. So in virtually every major city in the United States, there is, and this is, again, something that is not very well reported on. A great story for any journalist would be to actually count the number of PR staff and their total salaries at your local police and sheriff's department and your local DA's office. Because, we know from really great journalism that in Los Angeles, there's 42 full-time PR people at the sheriff's department and 25 full-time PR people at the LAPD. That's 67 in just those two police forces. And there's dozens of other police forces in Los Angeles. That's not even getting to the LA County DA's office, right? So what are those people doing? And those are just the people that are working full-time, right? These are not all of the part-time and all the other expenditures that police spend on PR and marketing, the slogans that are emblazoned onto every police car, et cetera. We know in Chicago, there's over 50 full-time PR people for the Chicago Police Department. That is up from 4 people when Laquan McDonald was murdered by the Chicago Police Department, okay? So astronomical increases in spending on people, on government employees whose job is to do public relations to shape local media stories. That's an incredible statistic. And we don't even know what that information is for most cities, because journalists haven't looked into it, because this is something that's actually hidden from a lot of city council people and county council people because the police don't report these line items in their budget. So this is an area that's very, very important, and it affects the number of people that you employ to do PR work. The budget that you give these institutions affects the kind of propaganda, the kind of stories, the kind of manipulation of crime statistics that Sam was talking about. And it also, is relevant to what Brendon was saying, because rather than funding high quality, constitutionally demanded indigent defense for the most vulnerable people in our society, and rather than funding those people to have a stronger voice in the media, a stronger voice to get their stories out in the public, we're not funding 25 PR positions at Brendon's office, for example, right? But rather than funding all of the actual substantive work that they do, we're spending that money in most cities in the US on PR officials for cops and prosecutors. And I think that's a very important point to think about when you think about the level of misinformation we're getting, the level of biased information that we're getting, and also the extraordinary disparities in funding. We've got public defenders with overworked caseloads in places where there's dozens of municipal employees doing PR for cops. And that is not a recipe for fighting authoritarianism in a society with the highest rates of mass incarceration in modern world history. So I want to shift a little bit now to the amazing Keisha Hudson, who is the chief defender at the Defender Association of Philadelphia. So Keisha, can you tell me what your office has done to connect with the media? How are you thinking about changing some of these narratives that Stan was talking about with respect to public safety, with respect to crime, with respect to your clients and their families and the communities? And what do people frequently misunderstand about public defenders?
Thank you, Alec, and happy Gideon Day to everyone. Before I get into answering your questions, just wanted to highlight that Pennsylvania is finally funding indigent defense statewide. Governor Shapiro and the legislature in Harrisburg for the first time has a line item for public defender offices in the state. That line item is $7.5 million across 67 county public defender offices. And of course, by comparison, when we look at statewide funding in Ohio and other neighboring states, Pennsylvania has a long way to go, but we are finally off the list of states that do not contribute 1 penny to indigent defense. I believe the only state that is left is North Dakota. So we're making some progress in Pennsylvania, albeit we do have a lot of work to do. We do make a real concerted effort to talk to the press and educate the press. Every space that I am in and with every stakeholder that I sit next to, I tell them in that room that we are the most knowledgeable about what it takes to achieve public safety. And I always get some interesting glances and perplexed looks. And I tell people we are the most knowledgeable about what brought our clients into the criminal justice system, right? We know what were the missed interventions. I don't call them red flags. What were the missed interventions that got our clients here? And our clients are coming from specific communities, Black communities and brown communities in Philadelphia that have been historically redlined since the 30s and disinvested and created multi-generations of poverty. And now we are trying to say, well, in a post-COVID world, Philadelphia is so violent. And I'm saying, well, when we look at where our clients come from, this has been a decades-long designed effort to pull resources out of communities, to disinvest. And now we are surprised that there's a rise in particularly gun violence in some of these communities. And when I say that we're the most knowledgeable, I counter the narrative with data. We have 2 data analysts, and I know we're fortunate in that respect. But compared to DAO Krasner's data lab, which has 25 data analysts, right? But our 2, we can do a lot. And we have the data that shows where our clients come from, where they live, how they got into the system, educating the media about the role of the dependency system. Philadelphia leads the nation in the number of Black and brown children removed from their homes and placed in foster care and or put up for adoption. Number 1 in the country. And we're seeing a lot of our clients who start off in dependency, our youth clients, end up in the delinquency system. 1 in 4 of them, in fact, and 1 in 5 of our adult clients came through the dependency system. And since I've been chief, trying to shift the conversation to a womb to prison pipeline to educate the media about the fact that child welfare reform is critical if we are to achieve public safety, keeping Black and brown families together, pouring resources back into these communities, making sure that we keep children in the home, give them the supports they need. Poverty is the #1 reason why children are removed, and educating them about, really what it would take to achieve true safety by addressing the root causes of crime. And we bring our data with us. And we have the best data in the city, and I tell everyone we have the best data in the city. We build relationships with the reporters. We have great relationships with the reporters who thankfully are now reaching out to us before publication, not always, but more than often now reaching out to us before publication. If we see something in the press that is incorrect, we jump on it immediately to correct it, and or work with our community allies or organizational allies to say, we need to send in a response to this to give the other narrative. The other thing that we're doing, it's just really, we are the holders of the stories, right? We know our clients, we can tell their backgrounds, we can tell their full complex backgrounds, and being in a position to be able to do that, right, humanizes our clients, for whom otherwise the police and or media may want to put in a narrow box of that day or event when an alleged incident occurred.
Wow, this is such a great panel. So much amazing information here. I'm gonna shift over to Robert Jones, who we're very fortunate to have with us today, from my second favorite city in the United States. Obviously, Pittsburgh is the best city in the United States, but New Orleans is a very close second. And he brings us experience as a person who is system impacted to his work. As director of community outreach and lead organizer for the Orleans Public Defender. And my question for you, Robert, is how does your office outreach to and make connections with the community? How does this work make our communities safer?
All right. Thank you. Thank you, and happy giving you day to everybody and everybody on the panel. Thank you for having me. I would say we realize as an office that we represent more than 90% of the poor Black and brown people, for the most part, that can't afford attorneys, right? And when we realize that those people are our community, right? Those people are our community, because so that means that it behooves us to be in the community, for public defenders to be in the community, because we represent the community. And sometimes I don't even like to call it a public defender's office. I like to call it a community office, right? Because that's what we are, we represent our people in the community. And how that looks is that we partner with local grassroots organizations and participate in like school giveaway, feeding the homeless, going to schools and colleges as well as churches where the people are in the community, and letting them know who we are and what we do and what we are able to assist them with. And in turn, what it does is, the power of that is that people in the community begins to know who we are as a public defender's office, and we begin to understand who the clients that we represent in the communities that they come from. And what that does is actually build trust. And when you build trust in the community, it's sort of like take away the narrative that that's so highly publicized throughout the nation, that public defenders are sellouts, right? And that because there are a lot of people, the press as well as people in the community, have been misinformed. And when people see you in the community, in other words, when you show people that you care, they care, right? And that's what we do, because the client that we represent, the people in our community that we represent, that touch the legal system and get involved in the legal system, that we realize that they have a lot of underlying issues. They have a lot of trauma that wasn't dealt with. They have a lot of drug addiction. They got a lot of mental health issues that wasn't dealt with, right? And the thing is, we always said that we provide this holistic service when people touch the legal system. But what about helping people to get these particular services or access to these resources in the community without getting involved in the criminal legal system? So, and that's how kind of like how we operate and how it's been working. And what that does is it brings about and I don't hear people talking about this a lot, it's called healthy communities. And not just talking about nutritional health, right? We provide these resources to create healthy and safer communities. And health, I mean, in the sense of having a thriving community, having a community that have access to the resources where people can get the necessary need, things they need before they touch the legal system. And I got to touch back on the piece with, you know, what Brother Brendon was saying is about how the parity issues and how it's important to fund public defender's office. And he took the words out of my mouth as it relates to how we represent more than 90% of the people in the country, poor people, right? And it's Black and brown people. But if it was white people, it'll be a different thing, you know. And I would say, and I think that that's a narrative that should be perpetuated by the media as well. It's kind of like giving a different look for us to focus on public defense. And for everybody who's listening, public defenders are like community heroes. I want y'all to get that and understand. Public defenders are community heroes because we're not only an office of attorneys, investigator, client advocates, and social workers. We represent the best of the best in the community, and we are there for our people in our community. So that's how we represent our community here in New Orleans at the Orleans Public Defender's Office.
That was awesome. And I just want to highlight something that Robert said, which just from my own experience, both being a public defender for 4.5 years, and then now for the last 10 or 11 years working with a lot of public defenders offices around the country, including many of the people on this panel. I've seen a real shift in public defender offices toward directing resources toward establishing connections with community organizing and thinking about their work not just as defending one person in one courtroom and standing in between, as one of you put it so eloquently, standing between that person and the government that wants to put them in a cage with no evidence that it makes our society safer, to punish people by putting them in cages. But thinking about how do we build longer and deeper and more meaningful connections with the communities from which our clients are coming, so that we can build power, share people's stories collectively, and change some of the policies that affect not just one case, but hundreds of thousands of cases. And it's really inspiring to hear about the work that you're doing in New Orleans, Robert. And I'm going to shift over to Jeff Wright, who is the state public defender in Iowa at the Iowa State Public Defender Office. And Jeff, thank you for being here. Can you tell us a little bit about the specific challenges faced by public defender offices in rural America? Because I think we've so far been talking to people who are thinking about these bureaucratic questions and media environments in kind of big urban centers. So tell us a little bit about rural America and how you think about these questions there.
Well, first, let me say I'm honored to be here, be a part of this panel. Happy Gideon Day, everyone. And, after listening to Robert, I think I want to go run through a wall, that got me pumped up about what it is that we do. But, in rural Iowa and rural America, there are large swaths of the country that just have a absolute lack of legal representation. And it makes it incredibly difficult for us to recruit people to do public defense work. We're competing not only with prosecutors who can pay significantly more in our state, but we're also competing with other legal entities that have, quite frankly, a lot easier work. And it doesn't mean that it's not valuable work, but estate work, real estate law, agricultural law, business and family law are all very attractive options when it comes between that and representing the accused in a criminal defense matter. You know, the things that we face in rural Iowa are not all that different from the things that are faced across the country, right? We have a lot more funding that goes to our police, a lot more funding that goes to our prosecutors, a lot of public perception about the people who are sitting in the room as they're being accused of a crime and what that probably means for them. And to have too few attorneys be able to handle too many cases puts an incredible strain on the people that we have that are already doing that work. You know, this is, and as we look at Gideon and as we think about what it is that we're doing here today, I think there was an attorney in one of my offices who brought up the fact that, you know, when you walk into that courtroom, you're standing next to someone who's accused of a crime, and that person faces a judge, prosecutors, police, public perception, oftentimes a jury who believes that just because that person is sitting there, they probably did something. And you are the only person who is standing there fighting for the constitutional rights that were guaranteed over 225 years ago by our founding fathers. And that is an important job. And we just, quite frankly, don't have enough people in large portions of the country who are willing to do that. And I just really appreciate the opportunity to be here, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Jeff. So that concludes the sort of initial speaker portion of our panel. We have a number of people who I consider true heroes here on the panel who are doing incredibly, as Jeff said, difficult work. But also, in my experience, it's the most noble work, and it's inspiring work, and it's incredible work to be a part of. And I think we can do a much better job than we have as a community of public defenders, communicating what that work is like and helping to tell our clients stories and helping to change the way the media and the rest of our society thinks about things like safety, change how they think about mass human caging, which we have, many of us, become so totally and utterly desensitized to. Think about, as Keisha said, the way that this system separates families, the similarities between this system and the system of family regulation and child welfare, and helping to draw out the connections for people between these various systems that seem like they're operating in silos, whether they be housing or healthcare or child welfare or environmental work or immigration and the criminal system, and helping to draw connections about how all of these systems are intersecting to control and surveil and dominate the lives of the most vulnerable people in our society in ways that extract extraordinary profit for small groups of people in our society, but that don't make anybody any safer. So I'm going to kick it over to Rabia Burks, who is going to lead the question and answer session for you all. And thank you so much for coming and for allowing me to be a part of this.
Thank you, Alec. Thank you, panelists. So if you have any questions, please go ahead and feel free and put them in the Q&A section. I'm going to start with some of the questions. Some of them have been answered, but I'm going to start with the ones we haven't answered and then go back to the ones we answered in the chat. So the first question is, how do we convince poor white clients and whites in general that the racist, racially biased criminal system, including underfunding of public defense, ultimately harms who we are, white as well? So basically, how do we convince people who are white people that this also impacts them? Anybody want to take that?
I would like to answer that. I would like to add something to that. I would say that I think it goes to not only just like gaining that person's trust, so that person can kind of like understand like who you are and what you represent, but also to let them know that poverty don't have no color, right? If you're poor, if you're in that environment, in the same environment as mostly black and brown people, you're in that environment, you're in the same boat. You're in the same boat because you know the system it's not going to work for you because it's going to put you basically in the same boat. Now, and don't get me wrong, and it may have some different levels of privilege because of the skin color, right? But for the most part, you're in the same boat. You're in the same boat.
Thank you. Are there any reformable Black?
I'm going to
Okay,
jump in
yeah,
there too a little bit. Sorry.
absolutely.
I agree with what Robert said. And so it's really about letting people know that once you are in the system is completely destabilizing, whether you're white, black, brown. And if you're a white person in the system who is relying on a public defender, you still want them to have the same resources that they would if there's a private lawyer representing them. And going back to what Mano said, Mano was talking about public safety and how public defenders are an integral part of public safety. We all want safe streets. We all want safe communities. We all want to be able to walk down the street without risk of being robbed or having our car broken into. We all want that. The problem is the way the system is created, it doesn't provide people with the resources to get out of a cycle of poverty. Public defenders, to their core, fight poverty. We are trying to get people into a place in our society where they're not reoffending. The criminal punishment system has one thing, has one goal, and that is to keep a certain class of people in a certain place so the system continues to feed itself and cage people. And so if you want to stop that cycle, you have to make sure we're funded across the board. Make sure it's better for people who are white, black, brown, whoever comes in contact with this criminal legal system. As what Alex said, these systems all talk. They all move with lightning speed, whether it be the child welfare system, whether it be the housing system, whether it be the employment system. Once you have that criminal contact, it destabilizes your life in every single aspect, whether you're white, whether you're black. And so if you want to create that public safety, you have to begin to see public defenders and community organizations as a part of the solution instead of a problem.
And can I just touch on that real quick, Rabia, which is that, and echoing the points we've just had, oftentimes, you know, there may be people who think public defenders, this kind of issue, that doesn't touch my life until their car gets broken into or until someone takes their cell phone. Then all of a sudden they're concerned about it, right? But we have to realize you just take a step back and look at what kind of housing justice, what kind of employment justice, what kind of or lack of criminal justice was there for that parent or that loved one, and how is that impacting the child who is now destabilized? Then they'll feel it. So if we can get that person to avoid a wrongful conviction and to avoid excessive punishment and to be there for their children are more stable, and we start reversing that cycle. But the methods we've been using to put people in and out of cages clearly isn't working to make us more safety, and we have to work on more long-term solutions to bring more justice to more aspects of our society.
Thank you. I'm going to ask this question. There's a couple of questions about this, but I'll kind of summarize it. With all that is going on and the rollbacks that are happening across the nation, how do you all respond to this precise moment? This moment where people, literally being scared into, rolling back reforms in a lot of states and everywhere else. So how are we to respond? How are your offices responding? What needs to be done? Because there's a vast majority, a lot of people here today really trying to get an answer to that question is how do we proceed given all of the things that are happening across the nation in different areas?
I want to jump into that. Well, what we do here in the Alabama Public Defender's Office, through our grassroots organizations that we actually partner with, these grassroots organizations, some of them are political organizations, some of them are different organizations that advocate for people rights in the community. Well, we work with these organizations, we partner with them. And what happens is that, we go and challenge various different legislations. We educate the public about these things to try to change, especially in these election years. And I can add to that, because in this crime-focused election year across the nation, what happened with me being wrongfully convicted and serving 23 years, 7 months, and 2 days for crime I did not commit, what happened in the early 90s is what the rollback is doing now. This fear-mongering is what happens is it changed regulation, rules, and policies, and it scares not only the public, but it scares people in those positions to start using people as scapegoat. And the people that they're going to use is going to use Black and brown people, because New Orleans and I think Louisiana, for the most part, at one point was leading our state in wrongful convictions. So what happens is when all these fearmongers in this election-focused, crime-focused election year, that's what ended up happening. We're going to get a lot of wrongful convictions, right? So what we are doing is our office, through community outreach, we're educating our people out of the community, as well as partner with organizations to try to combat some of these different changes. And and the only way you can do that is by making the public aware from somebody that they can resonate with, somebody who they trust.
Thank you, Robert. Stan?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's twofold. I think, one, you have to go on offense. And I think it's what Alec talked about, how defenders now, engage in the media, write op-eds. When the news reporter calls you for a comment, don't say no comment, pick up the phone. I think we need to reach out to universities and ask them to do panels and events, focusing on data and the issues at play. And, to Robert's point, the most important part of this is partner with your community, because at the end of the day, the one thing that motivates politicians, right, are votes. And if you partner with your communities, you partner, with church groups and union folks, and you get those busloads of folks, to go to your state capitol and really rally behind you, that is certainly going to get the attention of legislatures. So don't be silent. Go on offense, partner with community, and just keep on fighting.
And how is it affecting your budgets, if at all, these rollbacks across the nation?
I can touch on that, Rabia. When there is a cut to a public defender's office, it's felt. There's literally, if there's an attorney, 70, 80, 90, maybe more felony clients, that now you have a manager saying, who do I give these files to? It is a direct impact. Every single person, every paralegal, every investigator, every attorney, every social worker that we get has a massive impact on the community. Every cut has a massive negative impact on the community. So we definitely feel the result very tangibly. Our communities feel it every time there is one less defender. And every time there's one more defender, it has a huge exponentially positive impact on the community. Also, there have been some legislative changes that are starting to, if implemented, reversing some of the tide of mass incarceration. But if public defense is not properly funded, it doesn't matter if there's legislative change, because no one is putting these cases back in front of the court. There are so many people who have been either wrongfully incarcerated or incarcerated for too long, and it's been recognized by the legislature, but they are not coming home. When they do come home, they lead very productive lives, full lives, and make a tremendous contribution to community. But we need the funding for that. Right now in California, where Governor Newsom has made a big cut to a lot of the post-conviction funding that has happened, and we need to have that funding restored to public defender offices. So otherwise, these legislative changes don't mean anything, because they just sit as dry laws in the books that don't impact the people they were intended to impact. And that's just vital for community justice and community health.
Jeff, and just before you go, Jeff, there's one question that I would like for all the panelists to answer, not all of them, but most of you guys to answer right before we leave and end this. So if you guys could just hang around for just 1 minute after, that'd be great. Jeff?
So I think when it comes to funding, I'm in a state where we are consistently getting more funding. However, the legislature is also consistently passing legislation that is causing more work, and that the net result of that is that it actually costs us money. So when your legislature puts you in a position where the rules and the laws that they pass are creating much more work, even if they're increasing your funding, it can still be a net loss for public defender offices.
Right. The last question I have for you guys, there's a lot of people here who are interested in going into public defense, and especially at a time like this. And so what advice do you give to people who are interested in going into public defense? They are afraid that, being a public defender is not a good way for their career to go, all those kinds of things. And they want to know what actual impact they can actually have as a public defender. So any advice?
But yeah, that's about else I say. I would say that I think the important thing is when you and I can speak for all these public defenders office and maybe for other offices similar situated, that when you come to the work at a public defender's office, I think you get like boots on the ground type of experience, right? By sort of like understanding, the different communities that your clients are coming from, understanding these different environments, understanding these systems that they are facing, understanding their situations, and understanding also, are you participating in the necessary resources that they need? And I think that's different from just going working for a regular law office, right? Where you're just gonna deal with like your client, caseload, and that's it. You're not gonna be involved in anything. But working in the public defender's office kind of like give you a bird's eye view of the people that you're representing. And I think that carries you on, even if you decide not to be a public defender no more. You take that experience with you in other places, it makes you a better person, right? Because it take a lot of passion. It take a lot of love to do this kind of work, because it can be frustrating because every time you take 10 steps forward, or 5 steps forward, always 10 steps backwards, So you got to have a lot of passion in this work, and I think that experience will take you further, and for the most part, make you a better person.
There is no better legal job. What you get out of being a public defender, the ability to help people, to get people to a better place, to have an impact on people's lives, not just the individual you're representing, but their family, their brother, their sister, their neighbor, their son, their daughter, helping people transition out of prison back into society. This is God's work. And so, do not hesitate if you think that this is your calling. You will be a better person for having been a public defender.
Yeah, I'm just going to chime in real quick. To answer your question, what would you say to people thinking about becoming a public defender? Come work in Alameda County. That's where you should. I mean, of course, but I think that really, if you care about systemic racism, if you care about fighting mass incarceration, if you just care about people, this is the work you should be doing. I've been doing this for over 25 years right now, and I love this job. I love our clients. I love being able to get up in the morning and fight for people. And that's what you do. But don't get me wrong. Love this job. It's not an easy job. Okay. It's not easy. This job will crush your soul at times, but we need people to do this work, to fight for our clients. And I always tell people, you can come to a public defender's office and we can teach you how to write. We can teach you how to make arguments. We can teach you how to try cases. You got to have some skill, but we can teach you a lot. We cannot teach you hearts. We cannot teach you passion. We cannot teach you how to care about people. So if we don't have those traits, do not come to us, okay? Do not come here. But if you're a fighter, if you care about people, if you care about racism, then this is the job for you.
Yeah, it's a beautiful calling.
Thank you, Brendon. Thank you, everybody. Alec, I'm giving it back to you to take us away.
Well, I don't think I can top Brendon ever, so I'll just kind of let it be. I want to thank everyone for joining us today, not only to celebrate Gideon Day, but to hear from public defenders, which doesn't happen often enough in our society, and to think about why the stories that they have to tell, the work that they do, should be properly invested in by our society if we care about human flourishing. So we're going to follow up after this press briefing by sharing resources. So there's contact resources for public defenders in your area. Also, other kinds of resources that some of the questions asked about in terms of responding to crime narrative and places you can direct people to learn more. So pleasure to be included in all of this. Thank you to all the panelists who took time off. I know we lost Keisha to the courtroom already just a minute ago. I'm sure the rest of you have to get back to fighting for your clients. So thank you so much, Rabia, and everyone else from NLADA, April, and San Francisco Public Defender Office, Angela, for putting this all together. And hope everyone has a wonderful day.
Thank you, Alec. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Thank y'all. See y'all.
Thanks, everyone.
Good job. All right.
Thank you.